I mean, the easiest way is to look at how the market is starting to develop for off-site credits. Essentially, if you think about it, what somebody who is providing a credit is doing is guaranteeing to manage a habitat, including all the costs of managing that habitat, for 30 years. Yeah. And that is quite a big commitment, and especially if you try and boil it down to a present day cost, we're looking at inflation going in which direction. So it's a real challenge, you know, when you're looking at costing and budgeting these projects for 30 years. Some of the pathfinders in the biodiversity net gain space, which would be probably Warwickshire County Council, who have their own metric, and also I think Oxford, who have their own metric and their own system.
Not their own metric, but the Trust of Oxfordshire Environment are leading the way.
Yeah, they've led the way with that, and they've developed sites. I don't know where they've got to with Cambridge, but those sort of projects have been selling a biodiversity credit, which is the metric measurement, for somewhere in the region of £15,000 for that 30-year window. However, what we're now seeing happening as the private sector starts to get involved and we're starting to see new projects coming forward, we're starting to see very different figures coming forward for those credits. And on a couple of projects where I think we've been involved with recently, I think the budget figures that have been put into the spreadsheets for that project and the viability of that project are looking at £30,000 a credit. Yeah. And if you take that outside and over the fence to the person who is providing those biodiversity credits, if they start with a arable field, which might be a piece of arable land that has been probably pushed into arable through agricultural policy over the last 30, 40 years, is much more suited to being wet grassland or wet species rich grassland, there is probably an opportunity to develop somewhere in the region of 5 or 6 credits per hectare for that sort of site. Other habitats less, and one of the things very close to my heart as a Forestry Commission Director is that woodland is slightly prejudiced in this space, not because it doesn't provide a habitat with all of the benefits that many of the other habitats have, but because it is discounted back from the time that it is anticipated to reach its target condition, which is 30 years, I think, Joe, isn't it?
32.
So it doesn't score so highly. So Joe would be saying to me, well, I can create 5 or 6 credits to hectare if I put grassland in here. But John, if you put woodland in there, you might be lucky if you get 2 credits, which does seem slightly bad. Not quite so bad. It has improved, but it is significantly different. So as far as the cost is concerned, it is quite a substantial cost. You can never be, your metric is going to give you a number of credits that the site is either short or has in surplus for its project. But roughly speaking, a baseline of arable land and hedgerows is going to be scoring somewhere in the region of 2 to 3 credits to the hectare. So that's the main site. If 75% of that site gets covered with concrete and effectively goes from a score of 2.5 to a score of 0, you can start seeing that extra 25% has got to work very hard to get to either back to the baseline position or a 10% net gain. So you're almost certainly going to be looking at some level of offsite, and it is not unusual for that to be 20, 30 credits, on a reasonably sized project. And if that's the case, obviously there is a significant financial commitment that needs to be budgeted into the project purely for dealing with the biodiversity net.